Are you curious about the crazy world of concubines in ancient Japan? You might have heard about how they lived the life of luxury, but in reality, it was anything but that. These women were stuck in a living nightmare, forced to do unspeakable things to please their masters. Their daily routine was pretty harsh. They ate only mulberry leaves and drank rainwater, and that's not even the worst part. They were always being watched, cut off from the world, and used as sacrificial offerings to the gods. This is an eye-opening journey that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this dark piece of history that has been kept hidden for way too long. The life and times of royal concubines in old Japan. In Japan, there was this whole intricate system of hierarchy, where the wives and female relatives of the rulers were at the top, and the other women who served them, kind of like the ladies-in-waiting of European royal courts. These women had to do everything, from taking care of the rooms and wardrobes of high-ranking women to assisting them with grooming, providing entertainment, and even acting as secretaries, sharing information on palace intrigues. It was definitely not an easy life, that's for sure. But the lives of concubines in ancient Japan were even harsher. Polygamy was a common practice, and the women who served in the court were expected to be available for sexual services for the monarch. These women were later referred to as concubines, and if one of them caught the emperor's eye, she could be elevated to the highest position in the court. However, any sign of disobedience or incompetence could result in banishment from the kingdom or even death. The emperor was not limited in the number of concubines he could have, ranging from just one to potentially hundreds. Living in the emperor's court meant that these women had to lead drastically different lives from what was considered normal in society. Punishment for erring: death by 1,000 cuts. Even more interesting, being a concubine in ancient Japan was not just about serving the royals. It was also about being elegant and graceful. These women had to meet a certain level of expectations when it came to their demeanor, and if they failed to do so, it could lead to terrible consequences. I'm talking about being banished or even executed for not being up to par. In fact, executions of concubines for such offenses were not uncommon in the emperor's courtyard, and it wasn't just about their behavior within the palace walls. If a concubine happened to embarrass the emperor during a diplomatic meeting, she would be immediately beheaded. And it's crazy to think that even speaking out against the emperor could lead to death. And yes, the emperor may have been considered almost divine, but even still. There's the story of those two concubines who tried to poison the emperor and escape. What did they think was going to happen? They were executed by lynching, death by 1,000 cuts. That's just horrifying to even think about. Lynching was definitely not for the faint of heart. The condemned criminal would be tied to a pole or a stake, and then subjected to 1,000 cuts or more, which would ultimately lead to a slow, agonizing death. Can you imagine the excruciating pain in their final hours? It's definitely not a punishment that anyone should experience. One thing to note is that the emperor had his finger on the pulse of everything that was taking place in the palace. There were no secrets that were hidden from him. The bizarre diet in ancient Japan courts. In one story, there was a concubine who was the emperor's favorite, but struggled to conceive a child. When she finally did become pregnant, the baby was stillborn, and she became so paranoid about other concubines getting pregnant that she would force them to have abortions if she found out. One of the emperor's concubines was able to keep her pregnancy a secret with the help of a eunuch who had snuck her son out of the palace to raise him. When the emperor found out that he had a living child, he became furious, and even though he had named the son as his heir, he had the mother and the eunuchs who had helped her be executed. This just goes to show how the emperor's fear of losing power and control extended even to his own family. The concubines were also deprived of proper nutrition. Even though many people thought being chosen as a concubine was a big deal, their diet did not quite match up to that status. The emperors liked their women to be slim, so the concubines often went without food for long periods of time. In fact, the diet of the emperor's concubines was notoriously restrictive. The concubines were on a strict diet of mulberry leaves and rainwater to maintain slim figures that the emperor preferred. But unfortunately, this strict diet was so harsh that it ended up killing thousands of concubines who just couldn't handle it. It's crazy to think that even the emperor himself didn't have a great diet as well. Apparently, the emperor had a pretty wild diet, and it's been said that he would drink the menstrual blood of his malnourished concubines because it was believed to contain powerful medicinal properties. The belief was that by pooling the blood of different concubines and drinking it, he could gain immunity to illness, have great longevity in life, and perhaps even immortality. A life of zero privacy. Living in the courtyard of an emperor was seen as a dream come true for many young women. It offered all sorts of luxuries, opportunities, and other intense benefits. But here's the catch: they were pretty much under constant surveillance. There was zero privacy, and they had no freedom to do whatever they wanted to do. Can you simply imagine having to constantly be looking over your shoulder? But that's not even the worst part. In addition to having no privacy and no freedom, the emperor's concubines were assigned a whole unit to monitor their activities, making sure that they did not fall in love with anyone else. This also meant that they were never able to take a leisurely walk alone and always had to be accompanied by their assigned unit. Any disobedience to this rule could result in severe consequences that ranged from banishment from the kingdom up to execution. It's hard to imagine living such a life, always having to be on guard and never being able to fully relax. It should definitely make anyone appreciate the freedoms they have today. As if being a concubine in ancient Japan was not tough enough, it turns out that the emperor himself had some pretty unorthodox ideas. He would invite these women to join his courtyard only to subject them to his every whim. And there were even instances where the emperor would choose certain concubines to be offered up as sacrifices. One story tells of an emperor who had a disagreement with a general from another region. That general then demanded the head of the emperor's most valuable concubines as a condition for stopping the violence. Desperate to maintain peace, the emperor then agreed to the general's demands, and as a result, all of his prized concubines were offered up as sacrifices. But it wasn't just during times of war that the concubines were sacrificed. Sometimes they would be offered up as part of religious rituals in order to appease the gods. And the methods of sacrifice were gruesome. They could be drowning, boiling alive, and even burning alive, depending on the demands of the chief priest. And in the end, it's hard to fathom the level of cruelty that these women were subjected to. Thanks for watching. To learn more absurd and intriguing facts about world cultures, click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.